So taking a look at our first example, it says Hannah has $21 more than Cassandra. Both have a combined total of $55. Enter how much Hannah has. So the first thing I want you to understand is both Hannah and Cassandra, the amount of money that they have does total up to $55. So I'm going to start with that information. So I'm going to say Hannah's plus Cassandra's amount should equal up to $55 because combined that's how much they have. So now the next thing you want to do is decide, we're going to use a variable, but who are we going to assign it to? Since we have two people, my tip to you is to assign the variable to the person that we know the least about. So in this case, since it's telling us about Hannah, it says Hannah has, I would say we technically know the least about Cassandra. So I'm going to say let C equal Cassandra's amount of money. So now that I know that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and label Cassandra as C. Okay, well, let's just indicate this is Cassandra's money real quick. Okay, so now that we have that, what we're going to need to do is figure out what expression we should write for Hannah. So in this case, let's be reminded, Hannah has $21 more than Cassandra. So since it says 21 more than, that immediately makes me think of adding 21. But you want to be careful because we're adding 21 to something. So what are we adding 21 to? Well, it's 21 more dollars than Cassandra. So we're going to relate it over to Cassandra. Cassandra, we called Cassandra C. So we're going to take the amount Cassandra has and add 21. So this is what we have as Hannah's expression. So now that we have an expression for Hannah and for Cassandra, what we're going to do is go ahead and add them together to make sure they equal 55. So the first thing I'm going to check to see if I can distribute. There's nothing to distribute out here. So next best thing is to combine like terms. This is 1C, this is 1C. If I take 1C and combine it to another positive 1C, I have 2C plus 21 equals 55. So first we're going to get rid of this constant, which is a positive 21. I can either add or subtract. In this case, the opposite of adding 21 is subtracting 21, leaving us with 2C equals, let's see, that's going to be 34. Now in this case, we're going to get rid of this coefficient. Since it means 2 times C, the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So we're going to be left with C equals 17. Now we do want to be very careful only because they're interested in figuring out how much Hannah has. So in this case, we know how much Cassandra has because C represents the amount of money Cassandra has. So to figure out how much Hannah has, we're going to have to use the expression we created. Hannah is C plus 21. So what is C? C is 17. So Hannah is going to be 17 plus 21, which is 38. So how much does Hannah have? Well, she has $38. Moving on to our next example, it says here, the perimeter of a rectangle is 96 feet. If the length is 6 less than twice the width, find the length and width. So first, I like to start with a rectangle, in which I know that the perimeter is 96. Now, how do we find perimeter? Well, perimeter is basically adding all the sides together. Since they're interested in finding the length and the width, I'm going to go ahead and label the length and width for this particular rectangle. So here is the length, here's the length, here's the width, here's the width. By doing that, I can create an equation and say, okay, well, perimeter is the length plus the width plus the length plus the width, and that should give us 96. Well, now that we have that, we have a choice. We're going to have to assign a variable to one of them. We can either do length or width, and again, my tip is always to assign it to the thing that we know the least about. In this case, since they're telling us the length is, they're giving us some information about the length, I would say I know the least about the width. So we're going to say let W represent the width. So in that case, I can go ahead and keep the width as W for both of them, but I'm going to have to figure out something for length. What should I write for length? Well, according to the information here, it says the length is 6 less than twice the width. So first, let's concentrate on 6 less than. 6 less than immediately makes me think of subtracting 6. But we're going to subtract 6 from something. What are we subtracting it from? Well, we're subtracting it from twice the width. First, let's figure out what the width is called. The width is called W. So what's twice of W? Twice means multiplication, specifically by 2. So 2 times W would give us 2W. So this is the expression that I've created for length. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the same thing for this length as well. And I can go ahead and bring down the operations to make sure that they still equal 96. So there you go. We have an equation we can go ahead and solve. There's nothing to distribute, so the next thing I'm going to do is combine like terms. We have all of these W's we can combine together. So 2, 4, 5, 6 all together. We have 6W. We're going to go ahead and also combine these two negative 6's, which is negative 12. Next step is to get rid of the constant. We're going to either add or subtract. In this case, since it's minus 12, we're going to do the inverse and add 12 instead, leaving us with 6W equals 108. Last but not least, we're going to have to get rid of this coefficient. Since this means 6 times W, the inverse is to divide both sides by 6. So I'm left with the width is 18. So now that I know the width, I want to also then figure out what the length is. And if you're curious how I got that, let's remember W does represent the width. So I'm going to say the width is 18. Now what about the length? Again, we're going to have to go back to what we called length. Length was called 2W minus 6. So I'm going to write that right here. Length was 2W minus 6. So in this case, I'm going to replace the width with what I figured out as 18 minus 6. 2 times 18, let me figure that out real quick. It's 36, so if I take 36 minus 6, that is 30. So I would say the length is 30. So now let's take a look at an example of an equation. So I do have a list of steps that I go through. So the first thing I'm going to check is, can I distribute? The answer is yes. For this case, we are distributing a negative 2/3. Let's first distribute it to a positive 8/3 x. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into the calculator. Negative 2/3 times 8/3 is going to give me a negative 16/9 x. Now we're going to distribute a negative 2/3 to a positive 1. That's super simple. It's just a negative 2/3. We're going to go ahead and bring everything else down. So we're going to add 3/4, and it should equal 2/9. Now the next thing I'm going to do, according to my list, is combine like terms if possible. I can combine a negative 2/3 with a positive 3/4. Notice I always include the signs when I circle the terms to know if it's a negative or positive. So let's go ahead and put that in our calculator. We have a negative 2/3. We're going to add that to 3/4, and that gives us 1/12. So now that I have that, I'm going to bring everything else back down. We have a negative 16/9 x. Since this is a positive, I'm going to go ahead and put plus 1/12, and it's going to equal 2/9. So my next step is going to be to get rid of the constant. Just a friendly reminder, the constant is the number that's not being multiplied by a variable. In this case, we do want to concentrate on this constant here because it's on the side with the variable. We're going to either add or subtract to get rid of the constant. Since it's plus 1/12, we're going to do the inverse and subtract 1/12 from both sides. So it's going to cancel on this side, leaving us with negative 16/9 x equals, and right here, let's go ahead and simplify it using a calculator, 2/9 minus 1/12, which is going to give us 5/36. We're almost done. Last but not least, we're going to get rid of this coefficient either by multiplying or dividing. In this case, since it means negative 16/9 times x, The inverse is going to be to divide both sides by negative 16/9. So these are going to cross cancel, leaving me with x equals. So for this case, when you're putting it into the calculator, you want to be very careful and include parentheses around each fraction. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to go ahead and use parentheses and write 5/36, close the parentheses, and then I'm going to divide that by open up another set of parentheses, negative 16/9. Oops. And this is going to be my answer. So my final answer is negative 5/64. So it definitely suggests you have these steps memorized and use them to guide you through the step-by-step process of solving an equation. Looking at our last example, it says Delaney recently signed up for a gym membership. There is an initial fee of $40 in which Delaney is only charged once. On top of the initial fee, Delaney is charged $30 every month. What is the maximum number of months Delaney can afford with a budget of $390? So the first thing I want you to understand is, let's start with assigning a variable to what we don't know. Since we don't know how many months she can afford, I'm going to say let M represent the number of months. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to think about what type of information was given to me. I know she can only afford up to $390. So we're going to start with that. And also adding to what I know, automatically we're going to have to pull, she was charged $40. That's going to be the initial fee she's charged just for signing up. But then on top of that, she is getting charged $30 every month. So in 1 month it'd be 30, in 2 months it'd be 60, in 3 months it'd be 90, etc. So that is dependent on the amount of months she is still signed up for. So I'm going to go ahead and add that with 30, but notice 30 is going to get multiplied by the number of months. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply that by the letter M, because since we don't know that, we use a variable. So what does this equation mean? It means it's going to cost her $40, and that's for the initial fee, but we're going to also add $30 for every single month she's at the gym, and she can only afford to pay up to $390. So let's go ahead and figure this out. Let's first get rid of the constants. This is a positive 40. We're going to subtract 40 from both sides. That's going to leave me with 30m equals 350. Now we're going to get rid of the coefficient. Since this means 30 times m, the inverse is going to be divide both sides by 30. And m is going to be, let me do some side work real quick. This is going to go in once. It's also only going to go in once. Let's bring down a 0. That is going to go in about 6 times. And it seems like it's going to continue to repeat. So let's think about it for a second. You may think, well, 11.6, we can round that to 12. But let's think about it. If we round that up to 12, would she still be able to afford her gym membership? The answer is no. She doesn't have quite enough money to round it up to 12 months, so that I would say she can only technically afford 11 months. So remember, M represents the number of months. So in this case, I would say Delaney can only afford 11 months. So once again, you want to be very careful, even though you might think of this as rounding it to the nearest whole number, which is 12. Let's think about it. 12 months would be too much for her, and with a budget of $390, we are going to have to round it down to just 11.